morning, ladies and gentlemen. Is it possible to talk about the economy without talking about agribusiness? I hear this every time, that agribusiness is the next big thing. That if you want to move to that sector, the next gold mine, it is the agribusiness sector. But today we want to look at the outlook for the next half of the year. So we want to look at the first half and the second half of 2017. The first half, we know the first quarter GDP result report is out. The second half is a question of guessing or projecting what exactly do we hope to see in the second half of 2017, given that we were hit by what, 5-quarter negative growth in GDP. So these are the things we're going to look at: the global economic outlook, the changing global economic environment, the changing structure of the Nigerian economy, sectors contribution and growth, major leading indicators. There are indicators that are actually giving us the signal that there is hope. There is hope for the Nigerian economy in 2017. Implications and growth prospect for second half of 2017. Now, we all know that development and growth in Nigeria since 1960 has been characterized by the 3 C's: consistency, continuity, consistency, and commitment. And we see this across the different sectors of the Nigerian economy. Recall that we said we're going to be the 20th leading nation by the year 2020. And 2020 is around the corner. We actually, at a point in time, Nigeria was boasting of a growth of about 6.5% on an average of 10 years. And we're doing well as at that time. Little did we know that it was the oil sector and the oil price that was actually projecting Nigeria in that light. So up until the year 2015, the effect of intensification of the 3 C's at the federal, state, and local government level has manifested in the form of growth without development. And this we know that an economy can actually be growing but not developing. An economy can be posting growth but not developing. From all quarters, there's a great optimism that Nigerian economy will grow between 1% and 2% because the IMF said it, because the World Bank said it, that we're going to grow. IMF said we're going to grow by 0.8%. All the projection is showing that we are going to grow. But what exactly is driving this optimism? What is driving this growth? Is it as a result of policy changes? Are there policy changes? Is there a vision that Nigeria is driving that is taking us out of this economic quagmire that we found ourselves? Nigeria is currently fighting hard to come out of the economic recession and economic stagflation. We know we entered a phase called economic stagflation. We were looking at recession on the one hand. On the other hand, we were looking at unemployment and inflation moving at the same direction. This is a norm that economics will tell you this is stagflation. When you try to use monetary policy to solve the problem intensifies. When you try to use fiscal policy, it intensifies. It becomes a problem. No wonder the central bank did everything when we entered this recession. They couldn't address the problem because it was a dire circumstance that we find ourselves. Nigeria's GDP grew by 0.36%, minus 2.06%, 2.2%. Now, all of these were revised by the central bank recently and grew by minus 0.25% in the first quarter of 2017, officially putting us what? In a recession. We know that. Some of us were pessimistic initially by saying we're going to hit a depression. You know, you move from a recession to a depression, economic depression. And sometimes we pray that we don't even get there. The country experienced rising unemployment, rising inflation, and rising fiscal deficit amid declining growth, a term popularly described as a stagflation. Inflation currently is hovering around 16.1%. It has been coming down. Some analysts are wondering, what exactly? Are we really seeing it? Are we seeing it? Nigerian Bureau of Statistics released their last month-on-month inflation, and it was 16.1%. But when you get to the market, what you see in the market is that prices are what? Prices are going up. But then some of us will look at, especially the industrial sector players, when you look at the price of diesel, the price of diesel will tell you the story. When you look at the price of diesel, it is currently about 150 naira per liter. What that tells you is that prices are what? Are coming down. Prices are coming down. So the naira has been battered significantly since the inception of the APC-led administration. Now, some analysts believe that it was policy drag that actually put us where we are today, while some of us believe that it is not just policy drag, but about what? Lag in productivity. We're actually not producing anything. So the volatility in the exchange rate is such that by January 2014, interbank rates and the Bureau de Change rate traded at 160 to $1. It is now history, especially for us, for some of us, when we remember that we bought exchange rate, we bought the dollar at 160 not so long ago. And today we are looking at, it rose to about what? It rose to about $495 at the BDC rate. Now, all of this, we put a country, if you look at what happened in Venezuela, what exactly we experienced in Nigeria in 2017, Venezuela as a country has not gotten out of it because they had what? Multiple exchange rates, the way we had, say, multiple exchange rates. Now, as at 18th July 2017, interbank rates and the BDC rate traded at 305.86. And again, some of us believe that the central bank is now getting it right. The central bank has gotten it right. There's stability in the exchange rates over a period of 3 months now. There's stability in the exchange rate. But the truth must be told that the reason why we are seeing stability in the exchange rate is that our reserves is now hitting about $30 billion. Our reserve has hit about $30 billion. Another reason why you're seeing this is that the government is selling crude. Production has increased. Oil production has increased, and oil price is hovering around $48 per barrel, which means that the government is making money. And the central bank is using what? Such fund obtained from that sector to do what? To cushion the volatility in the foreign exchange market. The question here is, how sustainable is this move? How sustainable is this move? Does this drive productivity if we take from one sector to be funding another sector? And again, when you look at the margin, when you look at the current gap between the interbank foreign exchange and the BDC rates, you will see that arbitragers are still doing what? They are still happy trading in that sector. So we want to examine the global economic imperative, the new and operating macroeconomic environment, the current state of the different sectors, especially the different sectors of the Nigerian economy. Most private sector players are quick to ask, what sector should I play in? What is this driver of the Nigerian economy? Where should we play? At a point, the service sector was the driver of the economy, of the Nigerian economy. But when you look at the first quarter report of 2017, you will see that the service sector was lagging behind in terms of growth and in terms of contribution to GDP, meaning that the exchange rate was actually impacting negatively on that sector. Next slide. So if we look at, sorry about this, not so clear. If you look at the global outlook is posting slow but strong global outlook for first and second half of 2017. In its latest forecast, IMF projects growth of 3.1% 2017, 2016, 3.5% in 2017, and 3.8%. Now, this is the global outlook. But when you look at sub-Saharan Africa, we have two major countries in sub-Saharan Africa. You have South Africa and you have Nigeria. Coincidentally, both countries were experiencing same kind of problem, but both in recession. So sub-Saharan Africa is projected to rise from 1.4% in 2016 to 2.6% in 2017 and 3.5% in 2018. Now, if you look at the major countries driving growth in sub-Saharan Africa in 2017, you probably will be looking at Rwanda. Rwanda is pursuing inclusive growth, and they're actually growing at a very healthy rate. You look at Rwanda, you look at Ethiopia. Ethiopia is also amongst the drivers of sub-Saharan Africa. Nigeria is projected to rise from the negative growth performance of minus 1.5% in 2016 to 0.8% in 2017 and 1.9% in 2018. If you look at the government projected, in the 2017 budget assumption, the government actually said we are going to grow. Government had an optimistic view about the Nigerian economy, that we are going to grow the economy by 2.5%. I don't know how. When you have a 5-quarter negative growth in output, how you will suddenly jump to a 2.5% growth in the subsequent year. So according to OECD June 2017 report, the global economic outlook is doing better than the 2016. So globally it is estimated and projected that the world economy will grow in 2017 and 2018. So against a backdrop of growing nationalistic sentiment, we all know about France, about the US, about Britain, the Brexit, all of this are nationalist sentiment across Europe and Asia. OECD global growth rate will rise to 3.5% in 2017 and 3.8% in 2018 from a recent low of 3% in 2016. Now, all of this shows that we are in for what? Growth trajectory in 2017. So the major drivers of the economy is stronger economic activity, expectations of more robust global demand, reduction in deflationary pressure in the major economics, optimistic financial market. The downside to the global outlook are rising structural impediment, especially for us in Nigeria. A major bottleneck we have in Nigeria is institutional capacity constraint. We have a major problem in terms of bottleneck. Bottleneck slowing down those sectors that are actually the drivers of the Nigerian economy. So a major factor that triggers the volatility or changes in Nigerian economy between 2015 and 2013 was the decline in global oil price. Now, we have always seen this. We have seen this cycle for more than, I think we have experienced recession over a period since 1960. We have experienced it 5 times. We have experienced this cyclical growth 5 times. We have also experienced this shock. This shock we described as the Dutch disease, that every time oil price goes down, we catch the Dutch disease. Now, we caught it again in 2015, 2016, because we are not prepared. During the 10 years of plenty, we squandered the money. Now, during the lean years of scarcity, we started borrowing. Government started borrowing and looking for how to get out of the problem. So on the 20th of January 2016, global oil price reached the lowest price of $22.48 per barrel. Now, this was the lowest recorded in 10 years. The question is, are we likely to see this again? All indicators are showing that oil price is not likely to get to $100 or $80 per barrel. It is going to be very difficult because technology and innovation is actually taking the place in the energy sector. So if Nigeria, if we are building refineries and believing that the oil sector will continue to be there to take us out of the woods, then we should think twice. Global oil price has since commenced an upward trend, with the current oil price trading at $46 Now, this is yesterday's price, $46.45 per barrel. Now, between Q3 and Q7, Nigerian economy recorded 5 consecutive negative growth in output. And this, again, we will trace it to the declining oil price. We'll actually trace this to the declining oil price. But some analysts are of the view that it is not just the declining oil price that put us in this mess. It is that economic variables are actually prone to lag in policies. Now, if you delay in making policies, you're bound to be hit by what? By shock emanating from lag in economic policies. Some analysts believe that because the government delayed in taking a decision, we were put in a mess as a country, and that's why we are in this prolonged recession. But the question is, when you go out there to feel the impulse of the market, you actually don't see Nigeria as a country that is in recession. Most people are asking, are we truly in recession? Are we truly in recession? Do we see people carrying placards? Do we see people crying that they cannot buy food? If you recall, the double-digit recession that the Greece economy suffered in 2008-2009, recall that the old men would put their ATM in the machine and money was not coming out. And you see these old men crying. Question is, are we truly in recession? Or is it a question of data that we're using, manipulating data to show that there's a problem? So, but can the positive growth projection of Nigeria be attributed to the positive and proactive step taken by the central bank? Are we getting out of recession because the central bank did something? Are we getting out of recession because the private sector, as a driver, we say the private sector is the engine of growth. The private sector is now resilient and is moving the economy out of the wood. Or are we getting out of recession? I use one word, the hand of God. You know, in economics, the classical economists said, if you are faced with this kind of problem, do nothing. They say do nothing. Just keep watching. That the hand of God will always propel you back to normalcy. The hand of God will bring you back to equilibrium. And they say this happens in the long run. Now just wait, do nothing. The hand of God will bring you back. The Nigerian case, is it that the hand of God is propelling us back to equilibrium? Is the hand of God propelling us back to equilibrium? You will soon see that it is actually the hand of God that is taking us back to equilibrium. Because the hand of God is pushing the oil price up. And the optimism that we see today is that the oil price is going up, not due to our efforts, not due to whatever we've done back home. It is that the global oil price is becoming positive, meaning the hand of God is taking us out of the wood. By the way, I'm not a classical economist, but the classicals had this view, and I see it happening here in Nigeria. So as at April 2017, Nigeria's Bonny Light oil price had risen to $54 per barrel. Now, when government saw that we were hitting $54 per barrel, everybody started having wonderful and beautiful projections about Nigeria, returning back to status quo. That's fine. Our benchmark oil price is $42.5 per barrel, and oil price is now trading at $54 per barrel. So there's a windfall gain. But somehow it started dropping again. So oil price has been hovering between $45 and $50 in the last 2 months. And the optimism here is that it's not going to crash below. It takes time for the shale gas guys to come back to begin to pump more shale oil into the market. The Americans are doing that now. The OPEC have lost their control. The cartel have lost their control. But it takes time for the market, the supply to outweigh the demand for oil. So what is the implication of the current oil price on the Nigerian economy in the second half of 2017? Business as usual. We are gradually moving to the political, to the election year, where nothing is going to happen other than what? Pump in money into the system, pump in money into the system. Now, what happens the year that precedes the election year? You know, this is a cycle. The year that precedes the election year, money goes not into the real sector. Money goes more into the unreal sector. So and when money hits the unreal sector, two major sectors stands out: building and construction. A lot of people will channel these funds into what? Into the building sector. So what is the relationship between oil price and exchange rates? Every time oil price is rising in the international market, your currency is appreciating. The naira is appreciating. But you'll soon discover that since 1987, if you're looking at, don't look at the BDC rates, look at the interbank exchange rates. Since 1987, the naira has refused to come down since 1987. Look at the interbank rates. The interbank rate since 1987 has been what? Surging upward. To get what? The impact of the changes that has taken place in the Nigerian economy since 1987. The structure of the market has tilted more into what? Into importation, such that productivity-wise, we're actually not producing anything tangible that will command what? Our presence in the international market. When you look at what we are producing today, for all of us that are going into the agribusiness space, for all of us going into that sector, what you produce is price inelastic in the international market. It means that whatever you're producing, you are not in control. You do not have the market power to do what? To price these commodities in that space. But when innovation is the driver of your economy, when technical change is driving your economy, when productivity has been defined in terms of tangibles, then you're going to sell to the world market and determine the price at which you're going to sell to the world market. But what we sell today in that space, we sell cassava chips, we're beginning to produce, some have even entered the production of ethanol. We're beginning to produce, we're beginning to process things in that sector. But when you look at the things that we're processing in that sector, you are still not in command in terms of your exports. So if you look at the changing structure of the Nigerian economy, one thing that we look at in 2018 is the size of our population. The size of our population. Nigerian population is currently about 187 million. But when you look at the demographics, the population demographics, you discover that there are opportunities in terms of the size, there are opportunities in terms of the population dynamics, and there are opportunities in terms of the structure of our economy. Meaning that, first, we need to look at what? The size of the Nigerian economy. Secondly, there are challenges. Challenges in terms of the complex operating environment. Very, very complex operating environment. Any man that jumps into production will tell you that he has not hit jackpot. He has run into what? Into a complex sector. A sector that is undefined in terms of the cost of doing business. A rising cost of doing business at all levels. We have weak institutions and infrastructure. We have also volatile exchange rate regime. Not completely defined, because what is defining it now, the stability is that oil price is going up. When oil price begins to slide down again, the fear will return, the fear of that volatile nature. Rising incidence of social unrest. In fact, this is big. When you're traveling today, there's always that fear, there's always that tension. The insecurity in the Nigerian market space. We'll talk about that when we look at the population dynamics. Nigerian economy is currently the largest economy in Africa, with a gross domestic product GDP of $415 billion. Recall that we were talking about 568 billion at what? When we rebased and resized the Nigerian economy, we're looking at 568 billion. As at today, in real terms, we're looking at what? 415 billion. It means that your economy between 2014 and 2016 2017, your economy has been battered and your income has actually what? Dropped. Now, if you look at our per capita income, it has also dropped. We moved from $3,500 to about $2,150 currently. Nigeria currently occupies the 26th position in terms of world output. Remember, we said by 2020 we want to occupy the 20th position in terms of world output. Nigeria, however, has remained a monoproduct economy since 1960. We've not been able to get out of. When we did rebasing, we moved away. We stepped up a bit. We stepped up to the next stage of development by rebasing, but gradually, we don't want to go back to that yet to take off. In the world sense, we have actually taken off after rebasing our economy. In Q1 2017, the economy declined by minus 0.52% compared to minus 0.36% in the preceding quarter. All of this tells us that we are in recession and in crisis. Next slide. Next slide. This, in terms of the size of the Nigerian economy, where you find Nigeria. Now, in terms of the most problematic factors currently for doing business. Now, some of us will hear, they tell you that Nigeria corruption. When you listen to the radio every morning, they talk about massive corruption and looting that has taken place in Nigeria. And we all say it's corruption. But when you look at, the number one problem is what? Inadequate supply of what? Infrastructure. The number two problem is corruption. If you look same, if they are both related. If you look at a country like Kenya, you're going to see the reverse. A country like Kenya, you're going to see corruption as number one and infrastructure as number two. So we're actually not the most corrupt country in Africa. So we have access to finance, we have foreign currency regulation, we have policy instability, we have inefficient government bureaucracy. Now, according to the order of the strength of this problem, we have poor work ethics in national labor force. Now, this is a problem. You're seeking for people to work with you. All they want is what? Money and money. So we have very poor work ethics. Nigeria's per capita income has fallen below what I have there. It has fallen below 2,260. And like I said, the size of our output is $415 billion. Again, the most problematic factor for doing business is inadequate infrastructure and corruption. And sometimes we say, if our problem is corruption, let's just hit the nail and fight corruption. It is difficult to fight corruption because corruption is but a symptom. I always say this is a symptom. Corruption is but a symptom, and corruption is not the problem. There is a monster housing corruption which we cannot see. It's only when we see, if we can see that monster, that we can beat this problem called corruption. Now, if you look at population of countries in sub-Saharan Africa, one thing is common amongst the population of countries in sub-Saharan Africa. The percentage of population aged less than 15, volatile population age group. The percentage of population aged around less than 15 is hovering in the neighborhood of 43, an average of 43%. 43% of our 187 million people are within the age bracket less than 15. We know the implication of that. Less than 15. So the world population is projected to reach 9.3 billion by the year 2050. Nigeria as a country is projected to hit 395 million by the year 2050. Nigeria will be the third most populous country in the world. Meaning, for us, are we prepared for this population? The country is projected to hit the third most populous country in the world. Growing population dynamics provides opportunities and challenges. And we are beginning to see some of the challenges in Nigeria. Next slide. We are beginning to see some of the challenges in Nigeria. And when you look at, in terms of the dynamics, you will see that 42% of our 187 million Nigerian population belongs to the age grade 0 to 14. 52.9% of the 187 belongs to the age grade 15 to 64. Now, these people are not working. These people are active. If you go out, you see them working aimlessly, and they are in majority, which now makes it now puts fear each time you're going out that these people that are in the majority, we have actually not planned for them. Hence, there is what we call the so-called social unrest. So-called social unrest, so-called bloodthirsty youth, so-called mob action that you see taking place in our society are all a fallout of unplanned. We have actually not planned for that age grade. The current state of the economy, Nigeria is currently struggling to get out of the recession and stagflation. The state of the economy is visibly seen in the wide swing, the official exchange rate. Now, by mid-February 2017, the rate had hit $305 and $503. Again, some of us said we had that same argument. We had that argument of float the currency and do not float the currency. We had two groups. One group said government should float the exchange rate before the crisis. The other group said do not float the naira, do not devalue the currency. If you look at it, did we eventually devalue the currency? What exactly was the cost of taking the decision very late? We took the decision very late, and we allowed arbitragers, and we allowed that noise in the foreign exchange market to take the lead. Just like when we came up with the BVN, we announced the BVN that we're going to do what? Track accounts with the BVN. The moment the government announced the BVN, the government created a problem. Most people began to do what? Move their money from the naira to dollar. So we had more currency outside the banking system in foreign currency. Meaning, and when that happens in an economy, when you use monetary policy tools, it will not work. Because the central bank can only control the money in money in the banking sector and not money outside the banking sector. We saw that with the foreign exchange market, that the central bank lost control of that market because more of the arbitragers had dollars not in the banking system. And they also came up with conflicting policies that made us move our funds out of the banks, policy that stops us from paying money into our dorm account. All of these policies further what? Created and aggravated the tension in the Nigerian economy. Now, this is the story of Nigeria, hitting 6.54% growth in 2014 and declining to minus 2.34% in Q3 2016. And if you see, you can see that we are getting out of it. We're actually getting out. The trajectory is that we are gradually maybe by the time they return the next 2 quarter GDP growth, Nigeria will be out of the recession. Like I said, you don't get out of a recession by not producing, but you can actually get out of the recession if you produce more crude, produce more oil, and sell to the world market and continue the life as usual. Now, if you look at current sector driving growth, on the one side you have the agricultural sector, you have the sector growth. On the other side, you have sector contribution to GDP, sector contribution. If you take the aggregate in terms of the agricultural sector contributed positively to GDP in the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter 2016, and also contributed positively in the first quarter 2017. What does that tell you? The sector is the dominant sector, driving growth and even employing Nigeria. In terms of contribution, you're looking at the number of people employed in that sector. In terms of growth, you discover that the sector grew marginally from 3.09 to 3.39% in the first quarter of 2017. And crop production actually took the lead. If you look at the composition of the agricultural sector growth, you have fishing You have forestry, you have livestock. Livestock actually what? Decelerated. What that means is that not too many of us are going into what? That sector. It means there's a gap in the dairy sector for those of us that want to go into agribusiness. For those of us that want to go into that sector, there's a gap in that sector. But the interesting thing about this sector, the agricultural sector, is that it is not as simple as the government has hyped the sector. If you recall from 1960 to date, the government has invested massively in the agricultural sector. The government came up with all kinds of intervention. In the Goodluck Jonathan regime, we had the agri-transformation agenda. In the current dispensation, there's the anchor borrowers program that is currently on. Now, this is one sector that you don't, for those of us that are bankers here, this is a sector that you don't just lend to. You don't just lend to this sector. The reason is that the gestation period in the agribusiness varies from 1 to about 50 years. If I decide to go into timber cultivation today, I am not the one that will harvest the first set of timber. I am not the, it is my children's children that will harvest. So, which means that as an individual, I do not have the motivation to do what? To go into that sector. If you come across someone who wants to go into the oil palm sector, now the reason being that if you look at a 4 liter gallon of lubricant, a 4 liter gallon of lubricant and what it takes to produce the lubricant, and a 4 liter gallon of palm oil, recall that palm oil was sold for about 5,000 naira in 2016, December 2016. Now, the same palm oil was more expensive than your 4 liter lubricant, your 4 liter lube. Now, the question is, the technology for producing the palm oil is so easy. The resources in terms of land, there is availability of land everywhere. The resources in terms of how blessed we are, you discover that Nigerians ought to have gone into that sector. But if you find one person that wants to go into that sector, the gestation period takes between 3 and 7 years. It means that he's investing today, he's going to start reaping in the next 6 to 7. So his cash flow will be negative in 6 years. What that tells us is that the banking sector will never fund such business. They won't fund this business, but they will fund the trading business that you buy, you sell, and you return their money. And that's the story of Nigeria. The government also plays lip service, not understanding the sector. They give funds to people, we call them political farmers. They put funds in the hands of people that are what? Are not readily set for that sector. So today, we have the big players. We have the billionaires, the multimillionaires coming into the agribusiness space. And sometimes we say they are coming into their form. Because the first thing we need to know about this sector is to sit down and understand the sector. There's a whole lot of knowledge gap issues in the agricultural sector. So don't just throw your money around that you want to go into farming. You could get your fingers burnt in that sector. Then we have the mining and quarry sector. Mining and quarry sector contribution to growth. Then the share of mining and quarrying in GDP. Now, if you look at the share, you will see that there was actually a deceleration in terms of the mining sector contribution, meaning this sector did not contribute significantly to employment in 2017, in the first quarter of 2017. However, in terms of growth, one sector, that is quarrying and other minerals, actually grew significantly. And some were asked, what exactly drove this sector, mining and quarrying, in the first quarter of 2017? But others, on the other side, if you look at crude petroleum and natural gas, it grew negatively by -4 points. In fact, in the last 5 years, the oil sector has been lagging behind in terms of growth. Mind you, there's a difference between oil sector revenue and oil sector growth. In terms of revenue, Oil sector still contributes about what? About 90 to 95% to the government revenue. But in terms of growth, the sector has been decelerating over the years. The next slide. Now, if you look at the manufacturing sector, this is the sector that is worst hit. Only two sectors stands out in the manufacturing sector. You have the textile apparel and footwear. And we know that that sector is actually not doing well because most of the things we are putting on here are actually what? Imported. All our jackets are imported. Even with the high exchange rate, if you go to the market, we are still importing. Now, the sector contributed about 2% to GDP. If you look at the food, beverage, and tobacco, the food, beverage, and tobacco contributed about 4%, 4.33% in the first quarter of 2017. But the growth story is actually, if you look at the growth story, you will see that most of the bars are in the negative direction, meaning that that sector did not do significantly well. You'll find the likes of the brewers in the food, beverage, and tobacco sector. And the brewers actually did well. Some did well in 2016, 2017. If you look at the likes of Nigerian breweries, in 2016, Nigerian breweries became a major giant in the brewery industry, controlling between 65 and 70% of the market share. And if you ask them what exactly did they do right, the economy was sinking. They were actually what? Except for the cost of doing business, they were actually growing their markets. What exactly did they do? Innovation and technical change. Education was the major driver of Nigerian breweries. They actually kept on driving innovation. You know, today, cassava, some of us don't know. The reason why Gari is very expensive, is it a module or a bucket of Gari, they call it, rose to 1,400 naira. The reason is that Nigerian breweries discovered that they could do what? They could use cassava starch as a raw material in the beer industry. And they came up with this innovation. Today they are buying, aside your ethanol companies that are producing ethanol, Nigerian brewery has entered this market. They are now buying cassava. So cassava suddenly has become the new gold. So don't expect Gari price to come down because the derivative for Gari has actually what? Has actually increased. Now, electricity sector, if you look at the growth, one of the sectors that this government, in terms of the budget, one of the sectors that they said they wanted to fight to address is the power sector. But when you look at the growth, you can see the large bar, negative growth, about minus 44.46% in 2016. Again, negative bar for 2016. Now, when you have this problem, you're actually doing what? Slowing down the pace of growth in the manufacturing sector and slowing down the pace of growth in the service sector. The only sector that did probably well in that sector is the waste supply, sewage, waste management sector. Again, some of us will ask, how true is this statistics? Because when you drive across the street of Lagos, you see Loma picking dirt. People throw their dirt. You know, major economics, they say if you pollute, you'll do what? Polluters pay tax. You pollute and pay. In Nigeria, we pollute and we don't pay. In the morning, they drop the waste outside, and the Loma guys will pick them for free. So some of us will fault this data. Now, trade. Trade used to be the major driver of the Nigerian economy in 2016. If you look at 2017 first quarter, there was a growth deceleration in terms of what? The contribution of the trading sector to GDP. And we all know what happened, the exchange rates. The exchange rate actually slowed down what? The buying power of the people here. So trade slowed in 2017. But when you look at construction, marginally increased from 4.14% to 4.17%. Now, in terms of construction, you probably would say government effort at what? At moving away from expenditure on recurrent expenditure. This government said they were going to do about 30% capital expenditure. So if you look at the kind of road construction that has been going on, probably will say that's why construction is, again, moving up gradually. Next slide. Transport and storage, contribution to GDP. Here again, we find all sectors were decelerating, with the exception of rail and pipelines. Rail and pipelines. Now, for those of us that don't know, a lot is happening in the rail sector. A lot of innovation, even though it is slow, a lot of innovation is taking place in the rail sector. And we can see that the rail sector grew by 2.47% in terms of growth. And it was an outstanding sector in the transport and storage sector. In terms of contribution to GDP, the transport sector stood out, moving marginally from 1.02% to 1.15%. Now, the interesting thing about this data is that all the sectors that I've shared, in terms of their contribution, are actually what? Not living up to expectation. We're not seeing sectors doing about 20% to GDP. We're not seeing sector posting positive growth and positive contribution to GDP. It means that virtually all the sectors of the Nigerian economy are unstructured and begging for what? Restructuring. Any question? Any question? Virtually all our sectors are begging for restructuring. And there's one sector that is supposed to drive all these sectors. One sector that we call it the big push. If you push that sector, you're actually going to push the other sectors in the long run. But unfortunately, you said it's education, not power. Education. It's education. It's education. And we're not driving that change towards the educational sector. If you look at the educational sector today, it is more of a, we call it a social sector. We don't call it a sector that is a profit-driven sector. It's a sector that you give back to humanity. Today, most of the players in that sector are profiteering. They are actually making money. They are not driving the so-called what? Cultural change that will drive innovation, that will drive technical change. If you look at, what's this country now, where you have, I remember. So information and other sector contribution to GDP, the same stories. Same story, apart from arts, entertainment, and recreation, which grew by 11.67%. Arts, entertainment, and recreation. But the truth is that when you look at arts, entertainment, and recreation, and you look at the tools that they use in that sector, it is actually imported. The cameras, the videos, the gadgets, all that they use in that sector, it's the only thing that we can take is the what? Is what God has given to Nigeria, which is the ingenuity. Not necessarily what? Every equipment that we use in driving that sector is imported. So that's again the sector that's posting a positive growth of the contribution of that sector to GDP is about. Recall that this sector was missing in the previous dispensation. Before we did our rebasing, these sectors were not accounted for. And today it's even doing better than the financial service sector. The financial institution and the insurance sector combined is not doing up to 3% in terms of growth and in terms of contribution to GDP. Next slide. So you can see insurance, finance, insurance sector contribution to real GDP. Finance did positive growth from minus 13.16 to 0.6%. Finance and insurance did 0.67%. Now, insurance did 1 point. Insurance even did performed decimal. From the blue to the red means that they were actually going backwards. Now, what does this tell us? The banking sector is not linked to the real sector of the Nigerian economy. It means that they're not contributing significantly to productivity because they're not lending. They say we take funds from the deficit, from the surplus sector, and we push it to the deficit. That's their mandate. But what they actually do is beyond, that's what we are seeing, that they are not contributing significantly to growth. Now, when you look at the finance and insurance sector contribution to GDP, you will see that they're barely doing less than 3% in terms of the number. If you look at this in terms of what? The number of people that this sector employs, you will see that they're actually not doing well in terms of contribution to GDP. However, real estate decelerated from 6.48 to 6.32%. Now, this is one interesting sector, the real estate sector. One very interesting sector. Some will say there's a glut in terms of some sectors. If you are a builder, you discover that in most of the hybrid estates in Lagos, you have unoccupied houses. Unoccupied. The question is, what exactly is happening? The structure of the Nigerian economy in terms of the income bracket is actually resizing in such a way that you have more of those age group that I shared initially. Now, the people that I shared initially are not looking for a 4-bedroom, they're not looking for duplex, they're actually looking for smaller apartments. So if you are an investor, please do not play in that high segment of the market. You need to come down to the low segment of the market because there's still that gap in that sector of the market. You need to define that space. Next slide. In terms of other sectors driving, again, the same story. Educational sector is contributing about 2.12% and 2.14%, decelerated between 2016 and so the sector or the story of the Nigerian economy is that we're actually not doing well sector-wise. Some will blame it on power, like I will blame it on the educational sector, that we have not sensitized and stimulated the educational sector enough to begin to drive scientific and innovative changes in virtually all the sectors of the Nigerian economy. Next slide. The healthcare sector, if you look at the HMOs still largely unstructured and not fully defined for Nigeria, but the market is still very healthy. You know, this is a market where you can buy drugs off the counter. This is a market where this morning as I was coming, they were talking about drugs that have been banned in other markets, that those drugs are in the Nigerian market space. And the senators are now saying they want to look into it. What are you looking into? It is so easy. This is a market that takes everything. The market takes and absorbs everything. So because we don't have, there's a failure of institutions. So everything hits the market. So the health sector is still at the base level, not fully developed. So it's a sector that one can actually go into. Now, if you look at big players, there are some big players currently in the Nigerian markets. Doctors that are coming to Nigeria to settle and do business here. And all that they do is that they don't make noise, they don't advertise. There's one particular one in VI. You won't see any adverts. No sign that it's a clinic or a hospital. But when you go in, the number of patients that come in and go out, you'll be wondering, how did they know about this clinic? I once went there, and to pick up their card, you pay 50,000 for the card. Yes. To check whatever is wrong with you, they have all the equipment that you can think of. To check whatever is wrong with you, they bill you about 150,000. They've not solved your problem. They've actually not solved your problem. Just to tell you this is your problem, it's about 150,000. So increasingly, people are beginning to define the space in which they want to play. And the market is very healthy for investment if you define the sector that you want to play in Nigeria. So if you look at, because of time, I decided to box the changing structure of the Nigerian economy. I boxed them in terms of looking at Q1, comparative analysis between Q1, Q2, Q1 2016, Q1 2015, and Q1 2017. Now, if you look at the green is upward for 2017. The direction is showing that real GDP growth is actually what? It's going up. Compared with what happened in 2016, minus 0.67, minus 0.52. It is actually going up. If you look at interbank exchange rates, it is actually what? If you look at the, you will actually say it is going up. What that means, the difference you're seeing there is that our currency is taking a beating. That's why you're seeing 197 and 305. It means that your currency is taking a beating. Your currency has been devalued. That's the meaning of that. Now, that's why it is a red. It is negative, it is going down. You need to shore up productivity. You don't shore up productivity by pushing dollars to certain people. You don't shore up productivity by saying, okay, we have solved the problem of BTAs. Those that want to go, that's the newest central bank policy. If you want to go to school abroad, we will give you dollar. If you want to access Medicare abroad, we'll give you dollar. The more you do that, the more you undermine your health institutions. The more you undermine your educational sector. And that's what we are doing. We are trying to solve a problem. We are creating another problem. So we are creating another long-term problem. So you look at inflation. Inflation has actually come down. What we have, first quarter 2017, 17.4%. Currently, it is trajecting downwards. It is now 16.1%. The government has a target of about 12.9% for 2017. It has come down to 16.1%. And what is driving it? What is actually driving the slowdown in prices? Remember, we've entered the food season. We've entered the surplus season. We've entered the season where we waste. Every time you go out, you see people, once you begin to see people chewing corn, you know that we have entered the surplus season. The next thing you will see fruits. Fruits will begin to come out. What that tells you is that we have entered the season of what? Waste. Because everything we produce, we waste 50% during the what? During the season. So all of that explains why prices are coming down. But by and large, the government has actually done what? Pushed a lot of funds. This is what we call artificially holding on to the market. By controlling the price, by pushing a lot of funds into that sector, we are micromanaging the sector. When you micromanage a sector, the question will ask you, how long will you continue to do what? To micromanage that sector. For how long will you do that? For how long will you continue to make certain people rich at the expense of others? So that's what we are doing. Because we have been able to do what? Control the exchange rate, that the BDC rate has come down. The difference is still, the gap is still there, but not as much as what we had. Now, because we've been able to do that, that brought down the price of diesel. It brought down the price of AGO. It brought down which explains why inflation is trajecting downward. If you look at revenue, for the government it's a plus. You can see the green bar. It's a plus because government is doing what? Like I said initially, our reserves are suddenly hit 30 billion. Remember, when we were in the heat of the recession, we could hardly meet our 4 months what? 4 months imports, which created that fear and tension for the government. But today, it is going up. That's why there's a plus. Oil revenue is also what? Going up. Now, oil revenue decelerated to the point where there was almost a catch-up between non-oil export revenue in 2016, but it has started going up. If you look at crude oil production, now this data you're seeing was in the month of February, where we declined to 1.38 million barrels per day. It has actually gone up. Nigeria has returned to what? The #1 country in Africa in terms of oil production. We have actually returned to, we have overtaken the country that overtook us when we were doing badly. So we are now, we are currently doing well. We are gradually hitting about 1.9 million barrels per day. In terms of the oil benchmark, estimate is that oil price will average $50 in 2017. Now, if this estimate is going to go well, it means that we are going to coast along very well, because if the government is happy, then investors are happy, the private sector is happy. Now, in terms of the OPEC reference basket, we know there is always a gap between these two, that the Bonny Light trades higher than the OPEC reference basket. In terms of government retained revenue, it is going up, the green. In terms of our recurrent expenditure, government is spending more than they were spending in periods of what? Can you see? Recurrent expenditure, compare Q1 2016. Government, in a time where government is supposed to tighten their belt, government is spending. But we could actually explain this, that government is going into what? That when you are in a recession, you tend to do what? They say you spend yourself out of what? The recession. But not when the recession is actually a stagflation. Not when it is a stagflation. If it is a stagflation, it's difficult to spend your way out of a stagflation. You know, for a stagflating economy, you use a tight monetary policy to check inflation, and you use a loose fiscal policy to improve on your productivity. So you don't continue now to tighten. So government is spending, and we probably will link this to what? Government capex, capital expenditure. That government is improving. So if you look at the next slide, you see the gap between what? 72.3. Can you see the gap? It means government is spending. The challenge here is that, what are they spending on? What is the government spending on? That's the challenge. Every year, we go into road construction. By the following year, we see significant potholes. Significant. It means that there is a lot of things happening in terms of the way government is spending her money. And government, again, has intensified their revenue drive, meaning that they are going to pursue some of us. Government is thinking that we must tax these people. Now, in a stagflating environment, you don't tax, you don't talk about what? You are silent on tax. When you are in a stagflating environment, you don't pursue tax. In fact, what you pursue in a stagflating environment, tax holidays. You grant tax holidays to investors. You grant tax forgiveness to those who have what? Those who have not paid, you forgive them. But what we are talking about in Nigeria is forgiving those who stole money and coming up with a bill that have passed the first reading. Lagos State government came, if you look at the hub, the investment hub, you're looking at Lagos. Now look at what Lagos State is doing in terms of their tax revenue drive. What we're actually doing is playing with fire. That's exactly what we are doing. That's bring back the money. And the young ones, the younger generations that are looking at us, are actually saying that they're actually redefining the norms. And the norms they are redefining is that it pays to steal. And when you steal, bring part of it and you'll be forgiven. And you know what goes with stealing? Even when it means maiming and killing. Kill as many as you can, get the money, they will forgive you at the end of the day. So that's why we must be careful as a nation in taking this step. That the government is looking for money and the government wants this stolen fund to come back. They will take 30%. It's a problem. For me, it's a no-brainer. Now, the reason here is money does not drive an economy. If money can drive an economy, the British Empire of old, you know, the economic growth was defined in the time past as accumulation of precious metal that just keep amassing gold. The more gold you have, the stronger you'll be as a nation. But that's not what drives growth and productivity. So if you push money to me, I might not know what to do with this money because I have not been equipped with the knowledge of what to do when giving a fund. So I think the government, the private sector, like my sister that talked about the government, the more we talk about the government, the more we will do what? Move back as a nation. The private sector need to take what? The bull by the horn. Now, it is the private sector that will drive the economy and not the government. The government, I'll give us an example. When Chief Farms entered Nigeria, they went to between the boundary between Ogun and Oyo. Now, they got to a place where there was no light, there was no power, there was no road. The producers of Chivita, when they entered Nigeria, there was no government presence in the place where they gave them as a farmland. Now, Chi Farm is not a Nigerian-owned enterprise. It's a foreign-owned business. But they adopted the name. You think that Chi is a Nigerian name. Now, they entered the market at a time where there was no government present. But today, Chi Farm was able to do what? Make an inroad by investing massively in that sector. Recall that Coca-Cola bought a part of their shares sometimes. You could see that they've actually grown their business without power, without electricity, without good road, without education. If you go to where Chi Farms is, the only school you will find there has a dilapidated structure. It means that they don't even have manpower to drive their business. They had to recreate their own manpower. So the private sector need to take the bull by the horn by driving sector change and not waiting for the government. That's why I like what MTN is doing. You know, they are beginning to define the power sector. They want to play, yes. They are now playing in the power sector. Recall that the same way you recharge your phones is the same way you will recharge your power. It means they are going to give a run to the telcos and the gencos. What is actually driving this growth? Because I just showed you the manufacturing sector story. Manufacturing sector is not actually doing well. Our roads, because if you produce, you need to move your produce to the market. We have what? Dilapidated. Our roads are not what fit for use. So you find out that what is actually driving those green is oil price. If we show you what happened previously, you will see that they're all red. What is driving the green is that we are seeing what the optimism is that oil price is going to remain healthy at between $45 and $50 per barrel. Next slide. So Nigeria is currently in recession and is at the verge of getting out of it. From all these indicators, it shows that the outlook is what? Is positive. The outlook is positive. We're about getting out. Sector contribution and growth shows virtually all sectors are underperforming. Remember, I talked about all sectors underperforming, yet we are getting out of the recession. All sectors are underperforming, yet we are getting out of the recession. It means that the hand of God, the invisible hand, is taking us out of the recession. So if you look at, for those of us that are prone to holding our currency in dollar, the decision to hold dollar or to hold naira, the decision to put your funds in your DOM account, what this chart is saying, this is from 1986. You can see the exchange rate to the dollar, 1.76. You can see stability between what? 1960 to 1986. Remember what happened here? Structural Adjustment Program, SAP. What happened was that we increased, the naira was devalued by about 70%, because the naira was at par with the dollar at some times in the early phase. Now, when you look at the trend, please, what I'm looking at is not the BDC rate. This is the interbank rate. You can see how it has been what? Steadily going up. So what's the implication of this to businesses? Funds that are not, if you have cash flow, you don't hold it in what? In naira. If you have excess funds, do not hold it in naira. If you had 10 million in 2015, or you had 20 million in 2015 lying fallow in your savings account in 2015, you did not spend it, and that money is still there to date, 20 million in your savings account. You have actually lost money. Because your 20 million cannot buy you. The car that 20 million would have bought you in 2015 is now about 60 million. It means that you have lost money. So what this is telling me is that it pays not to even hold our naira. And the reason why it pays, I'm not saying go and hold dollar and keep it in your house. If you do that, you are creating problem for the economy. If every one of us here takes dollar and we pull it out of the system, we keep it at home, we create problem for the market. And that's what the arbitragers did. They held large chunk of dollar, not in the banking sector. And the government now compounded the problem by saying, don't bring your money to the banking sector, and allowed everybody to trade in dollars. So what that is telling us is that over time, our currency has been battered by over 8,000%. If you look at from that time, 1986 to date, it has been battered by over 80%. So between 2014 and 20, the Naira lost 94.6% of its value against the dollar. Now, between 1986 and 2016, it lost about 8,960%. Now, you can see the trend. If you map it out, you will see exactly what happened to us. And it's so easy. In 1982, a bottle of Gulda was sold for 1 naira. 1982. How much is a bottle of Gulda sold today? You can see the margin. Now, but when you compare that 1 naira in 1982 and you are in UK and you are looking at comparative analysis, their prices had remained stable over time to this day. So it is our currency that is fluctuating and not the what? The foreign currency. So if you look at, like I asked the question, the relationship between oil price and exchange rate. When this is the 2007-2008 crisis, you can see the volatility that took place here. When oil price begins to rise in the market, what happens to our exchange rates? Our currency begins a devaluation spree. When oil price starts falling, our currency starts what? Picking up. But in 2017, oil price started trajecting upwards. Our currency refused to recover. What happened? The first quarter 2017, we saw oil price rising from $22.8 per barrel. It started rising, it rose to $54 per barrel. But the exchange rate never recovered. What happened? We had more dollar outside the banking system. In fact, we had noise driving the Nigerian market as at that time. More dollars outside the banking system, more foreign currency outside the banking system, driving that noise in the sector. Now you can see what exactly happened. Here we're looking at leading indicators. So exchange rate is a major, the number one leading indicator that we must watch and observe at all times is the oil price. The number two leading indicator is the exchange rate. And like I said, do not monitor the BDC rates. Track the interbank foreign exchange rates and see how it is steadily going up. Steadily, you will see that it is adding 0.4, 0. It will go, before you know it, it is what? Tracking upwards. So the numerator is inflation. It is actually coming down now. Like I said again, what is driving these rates down is what? The central bank is actually what? Micromanaging the foreign exchange market, which is what? Slowing down the pace here. Remember that if you devalue your currency, you're bringing in imported inflation into your country. Because when you devalue your currency, it becomes very difficult for you to import goods into the country. So whatever you import, you are bringing what? Imported inflation. But with the stability that we are seeing today, the central bank has slowed down the pace of what? Inflation, but it is artificial. Because it is artificial, it is not sustainable. Say I have 5 minutes. So you can see the gap. It is actually coming down. This is the BDC rate that spiked to this point. Until the central bank came up, you can see the rate. Is it going up or coming down? It is steadily going up. And over the years, that has been the trend. And you know why? We are not producing anything. We are actually not producing. We are not producing anything. So the new central bank, if you look at the effect of the new CBN policy on the FX market, was immediate, it was sharp. And everybody applauded it. But again, it is not a sustainable policy. The central bank must begin to drive productivity. All our institutions must begin to drive productivity is the answer. But how can a nation produce when they don't even know what to produce? The other day I was in the market and I saw, you know, those of us, the people who eat ewedu, to make ewedu soup, you use what? There's a broom they use. Now, In our market today, there's a foreign imported broom from China. There's a foreign imported broom, well carved out. The head is well carved out, very solid. And I picked up this broom. This is what Nigerians can produce, but we have all sorts in our market. So the only thing that will redefine change, is productivity. And productivity starts it does not start with the private sector. Productivity actually starts from our classrooms, from the educational sector. Productivity starts from the classroom and from the educational sector. We need a private sector that will interface with the school system. We need a private sector that will drive change down to the school system by encouraging, the kind of projects that our undergraduates write, recycled projects. They move from, the kind, and who gives them this, the lecturers that gives them this topic also gives them what? Recycled projects. So what exactly do we do with those projects? Nothing. That's why your rechargeable fans, your all kinds of things that you have in our market are all produced from China, because we have gone to, our educational sector has actually gone to sleep. And that is the solution. The solution is not the government. The solution is the educational sector. That if we can go back, put our acts together to drive change from that sector, we probably will move Nigeria forward. I think I'll stop here. Let's take questions.